I'm going to cover all basics and foundations before I start going to more intermediate stuff. And I'm going to talk about mouse input, how to click and drag in Godot, and this is a beginner tutorial. And why is this important? I mean, as you know, most games nowadays, there's some sort of input with the mouse. If you play it on a computer, there's also touch input, which simulates the mouse. Basically, click, hold, drag. That's the foundation of so many games. Puzzle games, inventory systems. In this video, I'm going to show you how to click and drag in Godot, step by step, even if you're brand new to game development. Okay, to begin with, let's start back on the 2D scene. Let's give it a node 2D, and let's just give it a descriptive name, like let's say draggable box. So let's just add a box, a colorect here. Type in colorect. Let's give it a size. I'm going to go into transform in the inspector, and let's give it like 100 by 100. A pretty nice size. If you want, you can change the color of this to something a little more appealing. That's up to you. Let's save this. And we're going to give it the default name. And now we want to add a script to it. So let's add a script to the parent node, the draggable box node. And we'll give it the same default name. Let's clear out most of these functions here. And I want to start typing. For this, we're going to use something called a function by the name of underscore input. And as you can see, it comes up in the suggestion here as the first one. Let's click the documentation and see what it's all about. So void input event. It's called when there's an input event. So it's not just a mouse event. This is a parent event we're using here, the input event. Then we can filter down into what type of event we want later on. Let's click control and input event. And if we go down, we can see. So there's so many different events that you can use. If you scroll up to the top of this documentation, you'll see there are online tutorials here. I clicked using input events, and I got a nice little table. I'll just post it up here for you now. If you notice here, there's the input event mouse button, and that is what we're going to use in this tutorial because it's the mouse click we are looking for. So let's go back to our script. Okay, so let's start typing. First of all, we want to find out what this event was. So let's type if event. That's this event that we named up here. We can name it anything we like. We can name it Mickey Mouse. So if we did, we'll put if Mickey Mouse is whatever. So if event is an input, and if you scroll down, you'll see all the different input events you can use here. As I said, we're going to use the input event mouse button. So if your event is an input event mouse button, let's put a print. And let's just say mouse button. Yeah, there's my lovely spelling again. Event. And let's just save this. And let's play. So if you notice, I'm going to click inside the screen, and at the bottom here we should see a print statement. I just clicked once and there were two statements. That was my left button I clicked, but it's not showing up. It will show with any event, any mouse button event. So this is my middle mouse, two events again, and this is my right mouse. Pressing the mouse button is one event and releasing the mouse button is another event. That is why you're getting two events every time you click the mouse. Let's close this. What is this doing? This is looking for any mouse button event, which is basically a click or release. Also, mouse scrolling is also an event because that's a mouse button you're using to scroll as well. Okay, what we're going to do now, we're going to try to refine that click event more. So we're only going to look for a press event. So let's just say if event, the same event up there, the Mickey Mouse event, if you remember what I said before, dot pressed. So if it's a pressed event, let's print something again. Mouse button press. My beautiful spelling. Save this, and now we can remove the first statement, because if we don't, it's just going to come up again. We don't want it anymore because we are zoning into if it's a pressed event now. And let's play this. Let's move this up a bit so we can see the output screen at the bottom. So if I click, I get mouse button pressed, but there's no event when I release. Same thing if I right click, if I middle click, if I scroll up and down. Let's close this off. Now we can refine this further. We can look for which button was pressed. To find out which button was pressed, we can also use an if statement again, and we can say, use the same event name again that we defined at the top here. If event dot, and we're going to use this button index here because each button on a mouse has its own number, and we'll check that in a little bit. If the button index is equal to, there are enum constants that we can use, which makes life much easier. So we can say mouse button left, and I'll get into that a little more after I'm done with this. If event button index is equal to the left mouse button, let's print left mouse button pressed. And let's remove this statement up here. Basically, this is what we're doing. We're looking to see if the event is a mouse button event. Then we're looking to see if it's a mouse button pressed event. And then we're looking to see which mouse button was pressed, if it's the left button. Let's save this and see if it works. So I'm going to right click at first. You can see at the bottom left hand corner, I'm right clicking, nothing is happening. I'm going to scroll. You can see under the bottom indicator, I'm scrolling up and down. But when I left click now, in the output, it says left mouse button pressed. So this works. Remember, I was going to talk about the event button index. It says index. Why is this called button index and not button name or button constant or something like that? Let's just go back into the input event here, and there are a lot of helpful things you can read here. And if you go down, you'll see mouse button index. Let's click that, go straight to it. Let's click this again, and it takes you to something called a global scope, which has all the constants that we need. This enum on the mouse button none is 0, left is 1, right is 2, middle is 3. These are the constants we're talking about. Let's go back to the script. So over here we can say mouse button left, as you can see in the global scope. The name mouse button left is equal to 1. So if you would like, you can just put mouse button 1 here, and it's going to work the same way, because 1 is the same as the left mouse button. Let's save this and play. So again, I'm right clicking, I'm scrolling up and down, I'm clicking the middle button, and now I'm clicking the left button, and it works, even though the script says button index equal 1. So the constants named here makes life much easier, because you don't have to remember all these numbers. You can just remember left, right, middle, wheel up, wheel down, those sort of things. So I just want to point out something here. If you write the code the way I did here, it's going to look to see if the event is the mouse button event, and then it's going to look for pressed. But pressed can be 1, 2, 3, left, right, middle, buttons being pressed. That's 3 different events that you're looking for. And after that, it's going to look to see if it is button 1 or the left mouse button. Let's rename this to mouse button left. We can put this line above that line. So let's copy this and put it here. And let's move the event pressed, Control X, and put it here, Control V. It's going to work the same way, but this is less work for the compiler now. When the event is a mouse button event, it only has to look. After that, you filter out which button it is. It's just the left button, so it's only going to look for the left button pressed and released, and that's it. Just 2 events it's going to look for. The way we had it worded before, it's going to look for all the buttons being pressed, and that's a lot more work for the compiler. If we word it this way, it's just 2 things it's going to look for from this point on. It knows it's the left button it's looking for, so it's going to look at what the left button is doing. And then we look for the event pressed or released. You're probably asking, how do we get released? Release is just the opposite of a pressed event. So what we can do, we can copy this code here, Control C, and put it in here, Control V, and just put an exclamation mark, which means it's not pressed, which means it's been released. And let's say left button released. Great spelling. Let's save and play. So if you look at the bottom here, when I click, I'm holding on to the button. I'm not going to release this yet. It says left mouse button pressed, and I'm going to release now. And it says left mouse button last. So it works. So that's how you can tell if the button is released as well. So let's remove the last statement we put in there. And what we can do, we can, all these if statements, we can just bring them all together as one whole statement. So let's do an AND here. And we're going to bring this up to the top here. Don't forget your spaces. Let's widen this. And we're going to bring this event pressed to the top here as well. Let's put another AND here. Space. And event pressed. Drag it to the top here. And don't forget the colon. And let's delete these other if statements. So they're all going to work in tandem now. If the event is a mouse button event, and if that event has a button index of mouse button left, and if the event is pressed, we want it to say that the left button was pressed. And let's try this out. Let's move this. As you can see here, left M button pressed, and it works. So sometimes if you don't want all these statements, once you know you don't have to elaborate anymore within an if statement, you can just bring them all together like I just did here with and or sometimes or operators. In this instance, I want to keep the event pressed separate from the others, so I'm just going to move it down, back, Control X, and we're going to put another if statement down here. If event pressed, and I could just go back 1. Great. Don't forget a colon. Why I'm doing this is because I want to check if the mouse has been pressed or if it has been released. For example here, we can put else now. Else, if it's released, we can print released. So all this is saying is when I click the mouse button, the left mouse button, according to the if event at the top here, when I click that left mouse button, it's going to print left mouse button pressed, and when I release, it's going to say released. So let's test this out. So I'm clicking the left button. If you look at the bottom right hand corner, let me move this a bit. I'm clicking the left mouse button, left M button press comes up, and when I release, I'm going to release now. It says release. So we know this is working. Okay, I want to start adding code to actually check if the mouse has clicked inside of the rectangle that we made, the little color rect. So we're going to replace these print statements with some better code. I'm going to create a value called global rect. This is not necessary. You can actually wire it up straight into the equation, but it's so much easier to read if I do it this way. So let's just call it global rect. And all this is going to do is going to get the properties, the rect2 properties of our rectangle, which will be our color rect. Let's minimize this. Let me get rid of all these extra docs. Right click on one of those and click close docs. Nice. Clean up this area here for me. If we control click on the rect2, you'll get a description of the rect2 class. And if we go down just a little bit, you'll see the constructors for the rect2. What we're going to use, because this is what we need to detect if the mouse position is inside of the color rect. We're going to use the position vector2, this fourth one here, and the size vector2. So let's go back to the script. Let's drag the color rect in here. We want the position of the color rect. In this case, to make life easy, we're just going to ask for a global position. What a global position is, let me just go to 2D screen. A global position, this is our screen here, the screen size, our viewport. And if this was a game, this inside here is our world. Anything inside this viewport has what you call a global position. So at this point here, that's 0, 0. At the bottom right hand side, that's whatever the viewport is. Let's say it's 1920 by 768. I'm unsure. We could always go into project settings and check the window size. So that point is 1152 by 648 according to this here. And all these are in between. This point at the top right hand side is 1152 by 0. And this at the bottom left hand side, it's 0 and whatever number it was. Anyway, those are the global coordinates of the screen that we see when we play the game. That's the full global coordinates of the screen when we actually press play. And anything inside here falls within those global coordinates. Let me just go back to the script. So what we're going to get here is the global coordinates of the rect, because it could be anywhere inside the viewport. So just let's dot global position. And the second one, we want to get again the color rect dot size. And I see an error here. Oh, because I said val, not var. GD script doesn't have a val, it has vars. I can widen the script again. Enter. So now we have a variable for the global rect, which is a rect2 with the position, the global position, and the size information of our color rect. What we want to do is we want to find out if the color rect has a point in it where the mouse has pointed. So how we're going to word that is like this. If global rect, which we just created above there, and we use the keywords has underscore point. We're going to use point because we want to find the mouse point. So if the global rect has point and we want to find the position of the mouse, so what we do is we use the event dot, because the event up here is the mouse button, left mouse button pointer event, and we want the position of that event, colon. So if the global rect has the point where the mouse position is when you click it, basically that's what this says. So the mouse pointer is inside of the rectangle that we have, inside of the color rect. We're gonna put a print statement for now. And let's just put inside rectangle clicked. Let's save this and run. So if you click everywhere else, you'll see released, but we're not seeing any clicked inside the rectangle because according to our script, we have no other print statements except when the mouse is clicked inside of the rectangle. Let's click inside of the rectangle now, and you'll see at the bottom here, inside rect clicked. Anywhere inside the rectangle is clicked. So we know this works. At this point, I just want to add a new variable at the top, because I want a variable that changes when it is clicked. So we can say like selected is true, or even dragging is true, because we want to drag this. So let's create a variable at the top. Let's call it selected colon equal. When we use colon equal, remember it automatically assigns the type of variable it is. In this case, it's easy for it to tell that's a Boolean variable. So it created a selected variable set to false, and it's also a Boolean variable. This is the same as saying selected bool equal false. We can remove the print statement, and let's add selected is equal to true. So basically we're saying if we click inside the color rect, it is selected. And here we can see, remove the print statement and say selected is equal to false. When we release the left mouse button, it is not selected anymore. That's basically what this says. And now we just want to add some code for the actual movement and dragging of the mouse. So let's go down here, and we're going to say put an else if statement, elif. If the event is an input event mouse, gotta love my spelling, mouse motion, and if it's selected, then we can change the position of the color rect. So let's just put position will be equal to the event position being the position of the mouse. Now this is not complete. When we run this, you will see some artifactual movements, but I just want to point out that we're selecting the color rect with the mouse and we are dragging it. Let's save this and run. So now if you click inside I'm going to click outside and I'm going to click inside now, but every time I click inside and I try to drag, it's dragging, and when I release it, it releases, but every time I drag, the mouse is going to the top left hand corner, and that's because it resets on its own. We need to add something called an offset. So let's go back. It works as is, but the drag offset is just going to make it a lot smoother. So let's just add at the top here again, let's just add a variable, mouse offset or drag offset or something. Let's put mouse offset. And this is a vector 2. Let's give it a default value of 0. What we're going to do here, add an offset for where the mouse is. So let's just put mouse offset will be equal to the position of the color rect minus the position of the mouse where the mouse is clicked, event dot position. Why we're minusing the event position? Let's go back to the 2D screen. Let's just pull this to the center here. If I click inside this color rect, the mouse button is some distance away from the top left hand corner, which is the origin of the color rect. We want to maintain that distance. So in order to maintain that distance, when we click and move this, we want the mouse position to stay that same distance away from the origin of the color rect to give it a more aesthetic look. So what we're going to do is we're going to minus the mouse position from the position of the box, and we always use that difference to realign the box to where the mouse position is. Let's go back to the script and let's just add that mouse offset to the new position when we are dragging the box. Let's save this and run. If I click anywhere else, nothing happens. If I click on the inside of the box and I drag now, as you can see, the mouse pointer is maintaining position inside of the box wherever we drag. And this looks so much nicer than it warping to the top left hand corner. There's only one thing I need to mention now. All along, let me minimize this, we've been working with control nodes and dragging, clicking and dragging of control nodes. Let me show you what I mean. If I go to add another node, you'll notice there are different color nodes. There's the blue nodes and there are the green nodes. And well, red is for 3D. Green nodes are control nodes, which are, if I expand this, which are nodes that are used in the UI, the user interface. So this will work fine. That example we just did there will work fine if it's just moving items on the UI. But then you have the real game space that is behind of the UI, and it's not going to work on those real game spaces. Those other nodes will have to use something else, because these other nodes actually interact with similar nodes in the game space. But this video has gone on too long, and I'm deciding to make that a part 2 to this video, so we'll call this part 1. I'm just going to share a few slides and see you in part 2 of this, where we're going to use something called Area 2D and Collision 2D to actually create click and drag in a 2D game world environment.